Welcome. Today, we're looking, a really fundamental shift happening in the professional world.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about how we define what it means to be a successful man at work.
Exactly. It's a big topic.
We've got some fascinating material here. There's this one article, Redefining Masculinity for Modern Work Success, which pulls together quite a bit of research.
Yeah, from places like Harvard Business Review, McKinsey, Stanford, UPenn, LinkedIn, Deloitte too. Good stuff.
And we're also bringing in ideas from thinkers like Simon Sinek and Brené Brown.
Right. So our goal here, our mission for this deep dive, is really to unpack how some of those, traditional ideas about masculinity at work might actually be holding you back.
Yeah, holding you back. And we want to highlight the upsides of maybe a more flexible, more well-rounded approach to how you conduct yourself professionally.
Because the workplace has changed. What worked before might not work now. We want to explore why and what a more effective way might look like for you listening.
Okay, so let's dig right in. This clash, the traditional idea versus the modern reality.
Right.
The article kicks off with this story about a manager, David. Sounds like a classic go-getter, right? Always hustling, very stoic, never showing emotion.
The archetype. The kind of guy you'd think is on the fast track.
Exactly. So what happened?
Well, that's the interesting part. He got passed over for a promotion.
Passed over? Why?
The feedback was pretty direct. Poor team trust and an inability to collaborate.
Wow. So the very things he probably thought were his strengths.
Precisely. That emotional control, that competitiveness that were seen as negatives by the people around him, his team, his bosses. It really makes you question those assumptions, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And it's not just David's story. You mentioned that Harvard Business Review study from 2023.
Yeah, that one was striking.
It found that 58%, that's, a clear majority of men who really stick to those traditional norms, things like aggression, dominance, keeping emotions bottled up. They actually reported lower job satisfaction and got promoted slower.
Lower satisfaction and slower promotions. It suggests a real disconnect.
So why? Why are those traits, which maybe used to be valued, now causing problems?
Well, I think it really boils down to the nature of modern work. It's just different now.
How so?
Those behaviors, aggression, dominance, they can create fear, not trust. If people are afraid to speak up, you lose ideas, you don't hear about problems.
Right. And suppressing emotions.
It makes it hard to connect, to build rapport. Misunderstandings happen. And just trying to dominate all the time. It shuts down collaboration. People feel steamrolled, undervalued.
The article had a great line comparing the old battlefield idea to the modern workplace, calling it a mosaic.
Yeah, a mosaic of collaboration, empathy, and adaptability. It's less about winning a fight and more about building something together.
Which leads us perfectly into this idea of the lone wolf leader, that hyper-competitive, maybe emotionally distant boss.
Ah, yes, the old archetype. We all know the type, or at least the stereotype.
But the data just doesn't seem to support it anymore, does it? That McKinsey report from 2022.
That one's really powerful. Teams led by managers who focus on empathy and psychological safety.
Psychological safety, basically feeling safe to speak up, ask questions, even admit mistakes, right?
Exactly. Those teams outperform the alpha leader teams by 21% in productivity.
21%.
And get this, 45% better employee retention.
45%! That's huge! That's a massive impact on the bottom line.
It absolutely is. It shows that being supportive isn't just nice, it's smart business.
The article shared that example of Alex, the finance exec. He started out pretty intimidating, didn't he?
Yeah, very top down. But then he shifted. Started doing weekly check-ins, actually listening, even admitting when he didn't know something.
Which might have seemed like weakness before.
Right. But what happened? His team's revenue went up 18% in a year.
18%, just from changing his interaction style.
It shows that openness, that humanity, it builds trust, and that drives results.
And it connects to that Stanford study you mentioned about vulnerability. It's not just about being open, it's strategically smart.
Absolutely. Leaders who openly talk about failures, perceived as 27% more competent.
More competent for admitting failure. That feels counterintuitive based on old models.
It does, but it makes sense. It shows self-awareness, learning, transparency, builds way more trust than pretending to be perfect. Like the article says, collaboration trumps conquest now.
Okay, so if the lone wolf is out, collaboration and empathy are in. This brings us squarely to emotional intelligence, or EQ. EQ. Now, I know for some people, talking about emotions at work still feels a bit awkward. maybe uncomfortable.
And that discomfort, that's part of that traditional mindset we're talking about, this idea that emotion equals weakness.
But the reality, especially with remote teams, cross-functional projects, EQ isn't just a soft skill anymore, is it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's essential, non-negotiable, really. It's a core competency for navigating today's work environment.
The data backs it up hard. That LinkedIn survey from 2023, EQ ranked as the #1 desired skill by Fortune 500 hiring managers.
Number one, ahead of technical skills.
That's a huge shift in priorities. Why do you think it's become so critical?
Because EQ is the bedrock of everything else. Good communication, effective teamwork, resolving conflict peacefully. You need EQ for all of it.
Like that story of James, the construction manager.
Yeah, great example. Heated argument, project at risk.
Instead of doubling down.
He paused, apologized for his part, focus on the solution together. That's EQ in action.
And it didn't just save the project.
No, it saved the relationships, led to repeat business. It shows EQ isn't just about being nice, it's about being effective, reading the room, de-escalating, motivating people.
The article mentions the emotional intelligence appraisal test as a tool people can use.
Useful resource, yeah.
And I loved that Simon Sinek quote, "Empathy is the engine of innovation."
That's powerful. It frames EQ not as fluffy stuff, but as a driver of actual progress and new ideas.
Okay, so we've talked about empathy and collaboration. Let's flip to the other side. Hyper-competitiveness. That always win mentality.
Right. Sounds driven, sounds ambitious, but it can backfire.
How so? The article mentions burnout, obviously, but also that it can be counterproductive.
Yeah, that University of Pennsylvania study was interesting. Men who see colleagues purely as rivals, 34% more likely to hit career stagnation.
34% more likely to get stuck. That's significant. Why would being too competitive stall your career?
Well, look at the example of Mark, the sales director.
Ah, the lead hoarder.
Exactly. He wanted to be #1, so he kept leads and information to himself. Maybe looked good individually for a while. It poisoned the team environment, caused mistrust. When he burned out and left, they found out he'd withheld data, damaged client trust. Cost the company $500,000.
Ouch. So it really highlights the difference between healthy competition that pushes everyone
And toxic competition that just pulls everyone down. Modern workplaces thrive on collaboration, mentorship, celebrating team wins, not just individual ones.
It reminds me of that reference in the article to the free guide, How to Be the Alpha HA Male.
Yeah, kind of turns the title on its head a bit.
Right. It made the point that real confidence, maybe real alpha status, comes from abundance, from lifting others up, not pushing them down.
It's a very different, more modern take on leadership strength.
Yeah.
And that ties into the next big point. Flexibility.
Flexibility. This seems huge, especially now with remote work, the gig economy, Gen Z's expectations about work-life balance.
Absolutely. Rigidity, just sticking to the old ways of working 9 to 5 in the office no matter what. The article positions it as a real obstacle.
And there's data again, that 2023 Deloitte report.
Yeah, 67%, 2/3 of men who rejected flexible schedules faced faster burnout and slower promotions.
Wow. Resisting flexibility is actively harming careers.
It seems so. It can signal a lack of trust and inability to adapt. Plus, you limit your talent pool if you're totally inflexible.
Compare that to Miguel, the engineer in the article.
Right. He negotiated a 4-day week for childcare. Might have seemed like less commitment in the old view.
But his productivity went up.
Went up, and he got promoted within a year. It completely flips the script. Flexibility isn't weakness. It often signals security, organization, effectiveness.
It makes me think of that Brené Brown quote the article included.
Daring leaders are never silent about hard things.
Yeah. And asking for flexibility, advocating for what you need to be effective and balanced, that can be one of those hard things.
Definitely. It requires courage and self-awareness.
So to make this even more concrete, the article shared a few case studies, real examples.
Good ones.
There was Ryan, the tech CEO, gave a TED Talk about his own vulnerability. What happened there?
Incredible response. Job applications to his company jumped 200%.
200%, just from being authentic.
Shows that kind of openness is a talent magnet now. Like he said, authenticity attracts talent.
Then Jake, the salesman, labeled soft.
Yeah, soft. Because he focused on active listening, building relationships, not hard sell tactics.
And the results?
Sales up 40% in 6 months. Empathy and connection close more deals.
Amazing. And Tom, the C-suite leader, used to be a lone wolf.
Yeah, but he later credited his biggest successes to actively mentoring women and people from underrepresented groups, shifting from me to we.
Investing in others became his path to greater success.
Exactly. A total redefinition of what power and achievement look like for him.
Okay, so for anyone listening now thinking, this resonates, I want to adapt, but how do I actually do it? What practical steps did the article suggest?
It gave some really solid, actionable advice. First step, audit your own beliefs.
Look inwards.
Yeah, ask yourself honestly, am I holding on to old ideas? Do I think asking for help is weak? Do I equate emotion with fragility? Be real about it. And then actively work to unlearn the beliefs that are holding you back.
That self-reflection is key. What else?
Seek feedback. Directly ask colleagues, how can I support you better?
Simple question, but probably very revealing.
Shows you're open, you care about collaboration. And finally, embrace lifelong learning. Maybe take a course on EQ or DEI or collaborative leadership skills.
And it mentioned that How to Be the Alpha Male Guide, again, as a resource.
Yeah, for practical tips on leading with both confidence and compassion.
So it really feels like the core message is about evolution, adaptation, trying to cling to outdated ideas of masculinity at work. It's not just limiting, it sounds like a genuine career liability now.
I think that's exactly right. The future of work favors those who adapt. The article sums up true power really well, I thought.
How to put it?
As a balance. Competence with curiosity, grit with grace, ambition with allyship. It's about being more whole, more integrated.
Right. So wrapping this up, the main takeaway for you listening is pretty clear. Those old school, narrow ideas of masculinity, all dominance, no emotion, cutthroat competition, they can actually hurt you in today's work world.
Yeah. The key is redefining strength. It needs to include things like vulnerability, showing empathy, being flexible. It's not about being less, it's about being more, having a broader toolkit to succeed.
Which leads us perfectly to our final thought for you this week.
Yeah.
Something to really chew on. What's one traditionally masculine trait, maybe one you hold on to, that you could consciously rethink this week, specifically to help you thrive in the workplace that exists now and the one that's coming tomorrow?
Good question. A little self-audit based on what we've discussed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Take a look at your own assumptions. See what small shifts might open up new doors for success, maybe even fulfillment in your career. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.